wouldn't think of going fishing without bringing along the right tools for the job, would you? Then why go to work without wearing the correct PPE for whatever job you do? What's that? Glad you asked. Personal protective equipment includes things like hard hats, safety goggles, hearing protection, gloves, high visibility vests, work boots, fall protection, and more. PPE can prevent painful and possibly crippling injuries while you work. After all, nobody wants to get hit by a falling object, poked in the eyes, burned by chemicals, or fall into a deep hole. Right? Right. It's important to choose the correct PPE for the types of hazards you encounter on your job, whatever your job might be, from medical technician to construction worker, auto body finisher, or even landscaping contractor. There can be dangerous conditions that require personal protective equipment that not only fits you well, but is also in good working order without cracks, tears, or holes. Yikes! There may not be anything that can protect you from a shirt that loud. No, that probably won't help. But regardless of your supervisor's taste and fashion, if you have any questions about the type or quality of PPE that's right for your job, he or she is the one you should talk to. You can also consult your company's employee manual or even look at OSHA regulations online. Remember, everyone has the right to work in a safe and healthful environment. Access to correct, well-maintained and well-fitted personal protective equipment is an important part of that right. The point is, wherever you work and whatever you do, there should be a culture of safety at your workplace, one that's enforced and encouraged every day. No excuses, no exceptions. So be sure to take these steps. Learn about specific hazards you encounter on the job. Choose the proper personal protective equipment made to guard against those hazards. Make sure that your PPE is in good working order and that everything fits you comfortably so you can wear it every day. After all, you don't work to get hurt. You work so that you can enjoy your life with friends and family. Hey, nice catch. For more on workplace safety, call Montana State Fund.
Sorry, there's just a few people I need to admit quickly. Okay. So we've just had a short video about the personal protective equipment, just to refresh our minds about why are we wearing personal protective equipment. In the end, it is to protect ourselves against the harms around us. What does the law say about PPE? The law says that a company must provide PPE to their employees free of charge, that the PPE must be specific for the job. So you're not going to wear safety boots in a general working area, or you're not going to wear high heels on a construction site. So those are the type of things that you need to look out for. And then, of course, as we've mentioned with last month's session, the employee has a responsibility to take care of the equipment that's given to him. So an employee also has the responsibility to take care of their own PPE. So when it comes to PPE, yes, the employer must provide it to you free of charge, but as an employee, you must take care of the PPE because of the fact that the PPE is there to protect you against the harms from the work that you're busy with. So a quick question, you guys can type it in the chat box. Can you name the different PPE you as an employee should wear or are wearing when you are working? So I'm just going to give everyone just a few minutes to start typing and to share the PPE that you might be wearing before we go into the different types of PPE. Okay, we've got safety boots, disposable masks. Yes, more safety boots. Big thing in certain working environments. Reflective vests, earplugs, yes. Yes, high-vis jackets, hard hats, safety harnesses. Okay, eye protection gloves. Okay. See who else can share what they are wearing in their workplace. COVID masks. Luckily, we don't have to wear those anymore, or only in certain areas. Yeah. I call COVID masks flu masks because anyone who wears flu masks, I have flu, I slap a mask on. Fire protection clothing, yes. Acid resistant coat, yes. Okay. There's already a few different types of PPE that's coming through. Okay. So each working area will have different requirements when it comes to PPE. So in certain of your construction environments, we will be wearing safety. We'll have a full overall on, depending on the type of place you're working. You might have a flame resistant overall or a acid resistant overall. You can even have just a general overall, depending on the type of work you're doing or where you're working. Then over your overalls, we then have your visibility vests, we have hard hats, we have the gloves. So there's also different types of gloves that we wear for the different types of work. So the different environments will also dictate the type of gloves you wear. And then we have safety boots. If you're a welder, you have a welding coat, you have spats on your boots, you have specialized gloves for that. Thank you, Tabu. Also mentioned a respirator mark for the different types of work that you might be doing. So certain work might have fumes, like when you're welding or you're working in a specific plant with chemicals, then there might be fumes that you need to cover yourself up from. So there's each space has their own types of PPE. So if you look at the current picture, they're working in a manufacturing plant down in the boiler in the picture on the left. And there they're wearing hearing protection. So we have the earmuffs on the lady with the goggles and the hard hat, and she also has the reflective vest on. And then the guys have gloves here in the one hand. Those are gloves to grip things with, and that will protect your hands from cuts and bruises and things like that. And then they're also wearing hard hats, except for the earmuffs wrapped around his arm. It doesn't look like the other guy has any ear protection with him. So it's important that when you go into a space that it's that you have the right PPE with you. So if he doesn't have the right PPE with him, then he's not permitted to enter that area. Then here with the welders, we have the welding masks. They will have flame retardant vests on and welding gloves, but you can take it further and even give the guy a welding apron, which is made of pigskin to protect his clothes from any of the sparks. So even though this might be flame resistant PPE, it doesn't mean that there won't be small burns on the PPE in the long run. So whatever you use must not just protect you, but it must be specific for the purpose. So if you wear a normal cotton blend or polyester blend PPE working with flammable materials, you're going to end up putting yourself at risk because the cotton will easily start burning, the polyester will start melting, and that's why we don't use polyester when we're working with flames, because if you were to catch on fire, that polyester will melt into your body. Okay. Here we have a guy working with specialized chemicals. So here he has his respirator on, he has splash-proof goggles, he has an overcoat to protect him from any chemicals, he's got his gloves on, he's got Wellingtons on or gumboots on that's specific for working with chemicals. And then he had to go up to the top to go and get it, and that's why he will be wearing safety harnesses. So in the end, this PPE is wearing is specific for the fact that he's working with chemicals. And he needs to know that this PPE can protect him against the different types of chemicals you might work with. You might have acid that you work with, so you need acid protection. It might be, and now I'm going to forget the word, corrosive, so it can start eating into your skin. So again, the PPE must be specific for the corrosive materials you're working with. So you cannot just take any PPE and say, oh, this looks right, and go and apply it. You need to go and look at the safety data sheets and say, okay, this material or this chemical requires me to wear acid resistant PPE, whilst another SDS might just say that there is no harm to the person's body, just don't swallow or get it into your eye. So if it says don't swallow or don't get it into your eye, then you might wear goggles just to make sure that if there is any splashback, that the chemicals don't get into your eyes. Okay, so that's very important. I'm going to probably still repeat it a few times, is that the PPE must be specific to the work you're doing. Here we have another construction site. This is a more typical South African construction site. Guys are wearing their own clothes. They're wearing their own jeans and pants. And when it comes to this, when it comes to construction, it becomes a very difficult environment because of staff turnover. So a lot of your construction companies have this question, what do I do? Because I got this guy off the street today. I just need him for 2 days and then he needs to be off again. What do I do about PPE? And it's a very complicated and difficult approach, because the rule is very clear. You must provide PPE to your employees free of charge, whether they are working for a day or not. If you do need more advice about it, there are different technicalities we can look at, but for that you will have to contact us directly so that we can discuss what is the possibilities when it comes to your general laborers that might just be there for 2 days or for a day even, that you need to make sure, how do you protect them against the work you're paying them for without putting the company at risk financially, because we usually try and focus on the permanent employees to make sure they're protected, but it doesn't mean that the other lives don't have value as well. Okay. Then some of the other environments you might find when it comes to your medical practitioners or pharmaceuticals, manufacturing laboratories where they're testing materials. There will be, depending on the type of chemical or the type of testing they're doing in the lab, there might be goggles involved, hand protection, overcoats, usually just a lab coat. And there are very specific rules when it comes to that those type of industries, where those type of coats have to be washed in specific spaces because of the things that they might be exposed to. So you might have biological matter or what is it, material that people might be allergic to. So if you're working with insulin or not insulin, anesthesia, so there might be, or antibiotics, there's certain of those chemicals or materials that people can be allergic to. So if you take it out of the workplace, you will become a person who's contaminating the world around you. So those type of material or personal equipment has to stay with the company and be treated and washed and cleaned at the company. Same goes in the medical profession, when they're wearing their scrubs or anything that might be contaminated with blood or other bodily fluids, it must be disposed of in the correct hazardous control measures within the hospital or clinic. Okay, so those are just a few of the different types of PPE you can find in the different working environments. Before I move on to what do we look for in PPE, is there any specific questions that you guys have? Okay. So next up is what do we check for? What to check for when it comes to your PPE. So the biggest thing when you get to a checklist, the checklist says, is the PPE in a good condition? What does good condition mean? Does anyone want to share their thoughts on what they think good condition means? It's very quiet today. So it looks like someone just said something. Okay, thank you. So will it be fit for purpose? Mean it is still usable? Okay. Dabu, I think with some people, usable will sometimes even be with tears in it, but yes, it's still usable. Still providing sufficient protection against work environment. Very good. Okay. So yes, a good condition is that the PPE you're wearing must still protect you. It must still be usable. It cannot be something that are being disposed of or should be disposed of, to ensure that the person wearing it is still protected. Okay. So a good condition, as you've as mentioned, is the that it is still good for use and still protecting the person. Okay. So that is very important when you get your employees, construction site specifically, sometimes even manufacturing, the guy shows up and it looks like he's wearing an overall from 6 years ago. The moment they show up in that PPE and you know you issued them with the correct PPE, they either need to go home and get changed, which will then be no work, no pay, or they will have to get a second pair of PPE, but because you've issued them with a new pair of PPE, they will then become liable for the second pair of PPE that they now need to use because they are no longer safe in the workplace. So it's very important that the employees understand is you cannot come to the workplace in damaged PPE. And if it's damaged, you then need to make arrangements with your employer so that it's either exchanged if it was from wear and tear, or if you ended up playing around and you had your pants tear, then you're becoming liable for the replacement of that PPE. Okay, so an employee who doesn't show up with the correct PPE becomes a liability, a risk to himself, to his fellow employees, and to the company, and therefore he then gets sent home, and because he cannot do his work, it will be regarded no work, no pay. So the moment we start communicating it in such a way with employees, they usually have a better understanding of how important it is to protect themselves, because now we're talking money. Okay, so I really want to place emphasis on it. So especially if the employees take their PPE home with them and they are responsible to get it cleaned and everything, and then they come back, then they need to make sure that they come back with the right PPE. Okay. The same goes for safety boots. The same goes for reflective vests, gloves. Anything that they have to wear must be in a good condition. So it must be good for use and it must still protect them. I'll never forget on one of the construction sites I was wearing, one of the guys were doing the splits and the next moment his pants tore, and then he wanted to come back and say, but it was from wear and tear. He got the pants the previous day. So unfortunately, the employee had to pay for his new pair of pants because he was negligible. He did things in his PPE that PPE is not made for. So don't go and do the splits in your overalls because overalls are not made for the splits. The same goes for safety boots. Safety boots can only handle so much wet works. So if you are working with cement, you cannot have the safety boots walk through the cement every day. That's when you wear gum boots. The same goes for any PPE safety boots within a chemical lab or things that the boots must be specific for that type of chemical that you're working with, because if you use the wrong boot, then that boot will not last long enough. And either then from wear and tear, you as the employer have to replace it, or if the employee came with the wrong shoes to work, then they become liable to replace the boots or get a new set of boots to work with. Okay. So then part of good condition is that there may not be any tears in the clothing. So if there is a hole in the clothing or anything, it must be replaced because it's no longer in a good condition. Frays, so you get this specifically on your safety harnesses, that the webbing start to make these little hairs on them. The same with certain PPE on your coats. If you look at it, it starts making these little hairs, and the more it goes, you can after a while start pulling it, and you start pulling the whole string from, or yeah, let's stick with string, but you start pulling all of that out of your PPE. Frays mean that the PPE is weak and can tear easily at those spaces. Okay, so if you are wearing a safety harness and your safety harness is being frayed, then it means your safety harness is weak, and if you were to fall, it might rip and tear there, and you might end up then falling instead of being protected. Okay. Then we have burns, the color of your PPE. So you'll see something that's washed a lot starts to discolor. So your lab coats will start turning yellow. If you use a lot of bleach on your lab coats, it will start getting very thin, which means that the protection the PPE is supposed to give you is no longer present. Okay, your blue overalls start turning this grayish color. So everything from washing. Washing is part of wear and tear. Even our own personal clothes, the older our clothes get, the more it was washed and ironed, the weaker the fabric is. So that is very important to keep in mind when you are considering the condition of your PPE. Then cuts in your gloves. So when it comes to your gloves, the different types of gloves will determine what the purpose is. So you have your latex gloves, which is usually used within laboratories. It's used by medical professionals, and it's there to protect the hands against the biological matter they're working with. Certain gloves are protected against any punctures. So for those working with needles, certain of the thicker latex will protect you against needle pricks. Okay. So that is then also a protective mechanism. But the moment there's damage to those gloves, they have to be thrown away. In most medical professions, the moment you remove the glove, you throw it away because you cannot reuse it. The risk of contamination and exposure to biological matter temperature is too great. Then we have thicker gloves. It all depends on the type. So you have your polyurethane gloves. That's usually nice to work with small things. Our electricians still feel they can't do the job they need to with those. It's still too thick for them. It's a debatable aspect, but it's in the end the employer's responsibility to decide whether it is safe for them to remove the glove, or should an alternative method be used to work with the tiny materials or tiny parts that they're working with. Then we have your your pigskin gloves. Your pigskin gloves are usually for general work, so they use them quite often to handle bricks, to work with your shovels and your picks, and your gardening or your landscaping equipment, because you don't need to work very delicately. They're also durable and they are more affordable. Then we get our long sleeve gloves, also either polyurethane, latex, or even leather that is then made for specific use. So in certain biological environments, you will wear, and even chemical environments, you'll wear longer latex or polyurethane gloves. But in your welding and construction environments, you'll be wearing leather gloves because of the heat and the type of material you're using. But the moment there's damages to any of those equipment, it must be replaced. Then when it comes to earplugs, earplugs have discoloration, and it has density. So the moment you are working with your earplugs and it's no longer bouncing back to its usual position, or it's been discolored, it's no longer the color it came, so it's no longer that vibrant yellow or orange, it's now a muddy color, it's no longer safe to use, because now you're exposing the eardrum to possible infections. So make sure that it's not, the earplug specifically is not there to just protect you from the world outside you, the noises, but if you wear the wrong earplugs or it's dirty, then you'll be putting yourself at risk as well. So those are just a few things that you need to look at when it comes to the good condition. There's zippers on certain things. There is laces on your boots and certain boots. So all of those things must be inspected before you use it. And if there are any conditions or issues with your PPE, it must be reported to the correct person, usually a supervisor, a line manager, or if it's a small company, just directly to the employer.